Might be controversial to some because, well, hopefully we can explain it, but just because you gain horsepower does not always mean you make more horsepower. I know that's kind of a goofy sentence and definitely something goofy to write on the board, but, well, we're going to talk about it. Okay. I know it's a little late, but we're live. It's Thursday. We had a guest Tuesday, so here we are. Yeah, here we are. So hit the like button. It's the only thing I ask of you guys. But we're going to talk about two main things tonight. We're going to talk about ignition stuff and oil. The oil is inspired off Instagram, and the ignition stuff is inspired by, well, we have a new partner with the channel, with the show, with Granatelli Motorsports. So out at NPMC, met with JR Granatelli. And Granatelli's been in the game a long time, long time. Okay, but sat down, was talking to him, had no idea we existed, didn't know front wheel drive stock car racing was a thing, and explained who we are, what we do, different classes, all of that. And he said he'd love to be involved. So what I have is a set of their wires, spark plug wires, and one of their Pro Series coil packs. And I'll be honest with you guys, I've never ran any of their coil packs. And they are probably, in my opinion, the best coil packs for a Dodge Neon. So that's kind of what inspired tonight. So, yeah. I wonder if the numbers are right. So there's only like 10 of you right now. It's a little disappointing. It's probably Facebook. But all of you that are here, welcome. Okay, welcome. I'm going to set these out of the way just for a minute, just because I'm scared I'm going to knock these over. But they're spark plug wires. They do have a few different sets. They have a street style and motorsports style. These are more the race wires. So very, very low ohms of resistance in them. So look up their website, give them a call, check them out, see if they have anything to fit your application. You can't actually find this coil on their website. I've looked, but if you get a hold of them, they absolutely have them. So they might have something for your application. The way I was explaining to him was the K Series one was a big one that they could really break into the market with coils and stuff. And it sounds like if they don't have something already, the K Series stuff is on their radar to get out there as far as making products for the K Series stuff. So they should have some coils. I would hope at some point, but these will be on the car. I am taking a Bristol, so I'm actually going to put these on my dad's car. I told him that I run the K Series coils in my stuff, so that's what I have. That's why I'm interested in them. But I did explain that my dad's car has a stock coil pack, stock wires and stuff like that. So they graciously sent me out. I don't know why I turned away from you. The microphone's right here. They did send me out a coil and wires. So thanks to Granatelli Motorsports. Now, what inspired the oil talk on Instagram? And we're going to kind of start there for a second. Okay. We're going to start with oil just for a minute. We're going to cover it briefly. What started that was I shared a picture. And the picture I shared was me pouring Driven GP1 break-in oil into the motor I just put together for Mr. Doug Peters. And I captioned it, basically, when you put all that hard work and effort into putting a motor together, you want to give it the best chance at performing highly. Which, by the way, if you're on Instagram, just go follow Frontal Discussion, okay? And there was a comment under it, and I'm going to tell you guys, to be honest with you, I don't remember the guy's name. I have not replied to it yet because, like, it struck a chord with me, and I wanted to answer it in, like, 5 or 6 different ways, and none of them were all that nice. So I haven't answered it yet. I'm going to reply to it, but the message back basically was that, best is the strong words, and overkill is more like it. And then said I should say what the minimum requirement for oil is to do the job. Okay. So that was kind of what started the, like, what's the best? Okay. Because if you look on Facebook and you go in any of the front wheel drive groups and you go, hey, what oil do you run? What's the best oil to run? What's the best oil to run in an Ecotec? What's the best oil to run in an Ecotec? What's the best oil to run in an Ecotec? I don't know what it is with Ecotec guys. They seem to ask that the most. Okay. But you'll get 40 different answers, ranging from, hell, I don't know, whatever's in it at the junkyard, all the way to the highest dollar stuff you guys can imagine. Okay. I run Driven. I recommend Driven. We have a code. If you go to Driven's website, we've become affiliated with them. Yeah, you can go to drivenracingoil.com, use code the FWD10, you save 10%. Okay. I would believe in them, I would use them, and I would tell you guys about them, even if I didn't have that code or anything like that. Okay. I have ran Valvoline VR1. I could show you guys over here on our shelf. We've got quarts of it. Okay. Boxes of it. I've ran Lucas Oil Synthetic. I've ran cheap off the shelf stuff. I've ran Walmart oil. I've ran a bunch of different oils. And listening to a couple podcasts with Lake Speed Jr. Okay. Back when he was with Driven Racing Oil. Really changed how I see oil, and especially putting it in my race car motors. Okay. So I have had Lake on the show, did a really great interview with him. We are going to have him back on the show at some point here soon. I just have to schedule it with him. We are going to have another episode with Lake. But Lake is a tribologist, and it is just the study of lubrication, basically. And he is a wicked, wicked smart dude. He has a channel over on YouTube. You guys should go check out. It's just the Oil Geek. I think it's the Oil Geek. Let me double check. But you guys really should go check it out. He tests some really cool like ideas. Okay. Yeah, the Motor Oil Geek. Okay. Motor Oil Geek. Go check it out. And he does a lot of tests, and he uses science. He like actually analyzes this stuff in the lab. He's connected with Speed Diagnostics to be able to do oil analysis. Okay. Very, 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 very science driven. Like, what are the additives? What do the additives do? How much of the additives do you need? Which additives don't go together? All that kind of stuff. Okay. And to hear Lake talk about Driven GP1, which is the oil I use, and why it's so good, why it helps reduce wear, all that kind of stuff. Like, I was immediately hooked. I ran it. The first motor I ever broke in on that stuff had so much less break-in metal in the oil. It was insane. Okay. But when you hear people ask, like, what's the best oil? What oil should I run? Right? Every time, without fail, you get a bunch of people that they are going to suggest things like Rotella tea or Walmart oil or Amazon oil or the cheapest shit you can buy, and it doesn't matter. Or you want straight 50 weight. And all of them back up what they say with some version of, I've done it forever and I've never had a problem and everything looks great. Okay. It's purely anecdotal, right? I ran Valvoline VR1 20W50 for probably, probably 7 years, 8 years, and never had a single issue. Valvoline VR1, 1/4 Lucas oil, didn't have an issue. Okay. Switched a motor that was ran on that to a 1040 Lucas oil synthetic and picked up some horsepower and dropped some temperature. Okay. Built a new motor, ran it on Driven GP1 1030. Temps, not an issue whatsoever. Wear, non-existent. Compression, blow by. That motor routinely seen 9,000, well over 8,000 RPM, close to 9,000 RPM. Almost zero blow by at all. Compression numbers were amazing. Everything looked great. Every time I switched to something better, it got better. So my anecdotal evidence is it works, right? But I can share with you the science as to why. Now, am I saying you should go out, you should buy GP1, you should put it in 1030, all that, it's the best, it's all that? No. If you're running an oil and you don't have problems, you don't have temp problems, you don't have wear problems, you're not blowing anything up, keep running it if you want to. Okay. Motor oil is one of those cases of there are reasons to run the good stuff. There are reasons to run the best that you can. Okay. But you're not going to really notice any huge difference, most likely, if you have a fairly stock motor. If you're running a fairly stock motor with a somewhat decent oil, you don't have a lot of pressure trying to squeeze that film out between the bearing and the crank. But if you got something like we just put Doug's motor together, it's 12.5 to 1 compression pistons. It's a ported head. It's all brand new build. We got a lot of machine work in it, all brand new parts. I want to give that motor the best oil, the best additive package, the best wear capabilities possible, right? So I'm going to run what I believe in, which is the Driven, the GP1, the break-in stuff, and I've seen results with it, okay? So for me, I run a race motor. It's worth running racing oil, right? The oil is one of those things. The best product might not matter for you. If you got a junkyard motor that's never had good oil in it in its life, keep running whatever you want to run, okay? So the bare minimum, if you want to run the bare minimum, which is what I was told I should tell you guys what to do, if you want to run the bare minimum, all you have to do is just keep doing whatever you're doing and just keep going lower quality until it stops working, okay? If you're racing, if you're spending money on a motor, don't shoot for the bare minimum, all right? Just don't. And we'll do a bigger show. We'll talk more about oil and additives and all the packages and breakdown and all that kind of stuff with Lake at some point soon. He's now with Total Seal Piston Rings. So we'll talk about that kind of stuff. We'll get into it a lot deeper again. But there is some videos on the channel and go that way. So yeah, as Mike says, he runs GP1 in his junkyard motor. I for a long time said, hey, you just run a good oil and you'll be fine. And then I ran GP1 break-in oil and GP1 in that motor. And until the camshaft let go, I have never, and I mean, I put 2 or 3 seasons on that motor, spinning the snot of it. I mean, it put 238 to the wheels. Okay. Like it was nasty out of a little 2-liter Neon, right? When I tore it apart, the pistons, the cylinder walls, the bearings, the crank, all looked brand new. I mean, brand new. They looked immaculate. Okay. So I'm sold after doing that, right? Now let's get into some ignition stuff for a minute. This is actually the main thing I wanted to cover tonight, okay? And that's where I want to talk about gaining horsepower does not equal making more horsepower, okay? I know I just showed you guys that fancy coil pack and wires and told you how Granatelli has, partnered with us, sent us some stuff to try out, how I think their coils are some of the best on the market you can get for a Dodge Neon, right? MSD makes the coil for us. Their quality control isn't quite as good. That's why I like the Granatelli a lot more, right? I've always basically ran stock coils. I haven't messed with the aftermarket stuff, okay? And the reason is that your ignition system, these spark plug wires right here, okay? An industry first, near 0 ohm resistance, RFI EMI protected, OBD2 computer safe, and then underneath this one, which is where it would be normally a huge bragging point, the way they word it, up to 25% more power to the spark plugs. Granatelli, right here. Nowhere on this box do they say that it will make more horsepower, okay? Well, that coil pack, they don't advertise that you're going to make more horsepower, right? But if I install these, there's a chance I can gain horsepower. And the reason is that your ignition system, if your timing is set correctly, so when the spark starts in relation to top dead center, so if you guys have ever heard run 32 degrees before top dead center, BTDC, okay, or 32 degrees of timing or something like that. 32 degrees before your crankshaft hits straight up and down on the number one is when that spark starts to take effect. It starts to happen, okay? If you have your spark set at the optimum timing for horsepower, okay, if you add more spark power inside the combustion chamber, it will not make any more horsepower if you didn't already have a problem. Okay? A hotter spark does not equal more horsepower. But where you can run into problems, my motor, we switched over to the K-Series coils because I'm running a full standalone. I wanted to, with a higher RPM, I wanted to be able to separate the coils out and get away from a batch fire system so that we could have the dwell time and saturation stuff, give it a little more time to be able to spark. Didn't gain any horsepower, I'll guarantee it. But the motor that I have with, I had 13.5-to-1 pistons in it with the way the head was shaved and shaped and everything. We were close to 14-to-1 compression. There are guys out there that are 14, 15-to-1 that have high compression, very high pressure inside that combustion chamber right before ignition. The tighter that squeeze, the bigger the pressure, okay, the harder it is for that spark to actually jump, okay? Because your spark plug have your electrode that comes up, you have your strap that comes over it, right? Something to this effect. And that spark is jumping from one to the other, okay? Or back, right? But if there is air in between here and fuel in that air, it can actually prevent that spark from jumping from one to the other, especially if you have a weak spark. So if your coil only puts out a little bit of power, and at idle, it runs great. At 3,000 RPM, it runs great. But at 7,000 RPM, when you've got tenths of a millisecond to make things happen, the resistance is just a little too much, you get a misfire, right? Or it's delayed until pressure drops and then it ignites, okay? So you're going to lose horsepower. If that event can't happen when it needs to, you're going to lose power, okay? So if I put on some badass wires and I put on a badass coil and I triple the amount of spark energy that is available to the spark plug to make this jump, now that spark happens when it's supposed to, and we're going to pick that horsepower right back up, okay? So we're not going to gain anything if our ignition system is already sparking when it should, and it's actually making that jump, and it is a large enough spark to actually ignite the fuel air mixture, right? I never really had an issue with stock coils, just the way that my car was set up, right? I know a lot of people that have, though, that ended up running like a Granatelli coil, stuff like that, okay? So if you have a stock motor, a basically stock motor, a stock PCM, stock injectors, a stock coil pack is likely adequate for you, okay? You're likely making that jump like you need to. But if you're twisting higher RPM, you got higher compression, you got her tuned a little bit, your timing's changed a little bit, you might need to go to something like this. You might need a better wire. You might need a better coil. You will never lose horsepower swapping to this stuff either. And this Granatelli coil is going to hold up to harsh racing conditions. So a better coil might be able to, on the Neons, where they're placed on the valve cover, it is nothing for the heat to get trapped on the top of the motor, on top of the header, exhaust manifold, and to overheat that coil and cause it to lose power. That Granite Telly can handle a lot higher heat, okay? So in that instance, that would work better. With running a header and me cutting a cowl out and the way the hood sits and everything, temps aren't nearly as big a deal for me. So if you think your ignition is a problem, you're not going to hurt anything by throwing a higher power coil on. You're not going to hurt anything by throwing on a better set of wires. Now, wires, as far as better, okay, the faster they can get the spark energy from one end to the other, and the less amount of resistance that it takes that electricity, the less resistance that electricity has to go through, the more of that energy is delivered to the spark plug, okay? Electricity is one of them crazy things that it moves quickly, but not for free. When it travels through something, it's going to lose a little bit of power as it travels through that object. Like a human being, right? We provide enough resistance, it'll cut some power through there. Spark plug wires are no different. Your average street car can be anywhere from 1,000 to 5,000 ohms of resistance a foot, essentially, okay? That number can move around a little bit, but it's pretty high. It has a lot of resistance through it. The reason that it does is that it wants to slow that spark down just a slight bit, and it's shielding it from sending EMF and RFI out of the engine bay. So if you guys have ever driven an older car that when you turn the radio on, it goes wee, wee, as you rev it up, that's the ignition, that's the wires, that's the spark energy interfering with the radio. That's that EMF, that's that RFI, okay? Wires have gotten a lot better where they're shielded from that. So it isn't as big a deal to have a low resistance wire. But most street cars nowadays don't have wires. They have the coil attached to the spark plug with, a tiny boot, right? But in a race application, I don't care if it causes noise in the radio. I don't have a radio, right? I want the lowest ohm wire I can get that's durable and will live in high heat, high stress, high vibration environments, okay? That's where these like Granite Tellys come into play. Your stock wires, on a Neon, these aren't very long. This is, all the longer they are, okay? So the difference between OEM and one of these probably isn't a huge deal. However, some of the B series Honda guys, where you guys have significantly longer spark plug wires, it can make a much bigger difference. You can supply much more energy to the spark plug by having a much better wire. The only negative to a high quality wire set is price. You're going to pay more for it. Okay. Same thing with a coil pack. You're going to pay more for it. Okay. Now let's talk about spark plugs, because this is the one that I see that a lot of people, well, I got the best. When you would be surprised that sometimes the best not actually that good in a race car. Okay. I'm curious. Comment below or the side or wherever it's at. I want to know what spark plugs you run in your race car. Okay. I'm curious. What spark plugs do you run in your race car? I used to run NGK Denso, the NGK Iridiums. Yeah, I ran NGK Iridiums. Okay. Little firewire, tiny little guys. Never really had an issue with them. But God, they were like $14 a piece. Okay. Went to the dyno, and I was that guy. I've been that guy basically every time I've ever went to the dyno, and had a set of fouled out plugs. Didn't realize it, but the tune was way off. I built the tune from scratch, built the wiring harness from scratch. So cut me some slack, right? But needed some plugs. So he's like, "What do you got in here?" Okay. And I told him, and Tyler's like, "Ah, dude." He's like, "Nah, I got you." And he just got some Autolite coppers, had them delivered. And once we figured out the tune, car ran great. And I've been running them ever since. They're like $1.50, maybe $2. Okay. And that was a few years ago. Kind of educated myself a little bit more. And I knew it back then, but I didn't want to believe it, right? Spark plugs come in about 4 or 5 different varieties. All right. Copper. They are the cheapest. They are just the standard spark plug. Okay. Champion coppers, Autolite coppers, whatever you want to call them. It's just been the plug for a long time. Okay. Then along came platinum. Okay. Got you some platinum spark plugs. Your OEM is likely a platinum spark plug, right? Then you got things like the Bosch double platinum. Well, there's platinum, then there's double platinum. Again, you have your electrode and you have your strap, okay? What a lot of platinum plugs, they'd have a little pad here. That would be that piece of platinum. Then they started, the tip also was platinum, right? So platinum, double platinum. Then you had like Bosch come out with you got your electrode, and then they have it where they got this goofy guy, right? Or it kind of goes like this, where you got 2 electrodes, right? Then you got the 4 one, which if you look at it from the top, you got that, and then you got a strap over here, and a strap over here, and a strap over here, and a strap over here. And you're like, well, if 1 is good, 2 is great, 4 is just, okay? And then there's, a few of you say it, but then there's the old E3s that came out. And the E3 is like, all right, here's our electrode, and we're just going to make this huge thing go around our spark plug, right? E3 likes to make some claims about what they're going to do, about how much horsepower they're going to gain you, which a spark plug that tells you they're going to gain you horsepower, some snake oil, okay? There's been a lot of companies, a lot of like magazines and stuff like that have tested spark plugs. All right. And I have yet to see a single dyno test done by anybody that was not E3 that didn't show that the E3 performed or worse than just a copper plug. Okay. Part of the reason why the copper plugs work so well, and they have for so long, is that copper is one of the best conductors of electricity on the planet. As far as like cost goes, right? Like gold's a much better conductor, but gold can't stand the high heat of like a combustion chamber, and it's a little more expensive if you were building spark plugs out of it, right? So copper for like cost and durability, one of the best conductors on the planet. Okay. The problem with copper is that when you have your electrode, am I going to have to switch I'm going to switch markers again. Let's see if red works pretty good. I got to buy a new pack of markers. There we go. Got your electrode, got your strap. Okay. The problem is every time a spark comes up here, it just eats a little tiny bit of that spark plug out. Okay. Until you go from having your gap goes from like, 0.035 to, this is where your electrode's supposed to be. It ends up with your electrode down here and your strap looks something like this, right? We've all seen it. We've all been there. I just did that in my van. Okay. Well, the problem is now that gap is something like, 0.15, right? The farther those are apart, the harder they are to spark. Okay. It's physics. Thing is, though, that's what copper does. It wears out. So it sparks great, but it wears out. Well, if I'm trying to build a car and I'm going to give you a warranty for 100,000 miles, right? Say like an OEM automaker, I'm not going to have to replace these every 30,000 miles because you are going to cost me money. So what I want is a spark plug that won't do this over the course of 100,000 miles. So along comes our good buddy Platinum. So now Platinum, with its little platinum pad, and this is all platinum, Platinum is not nearly as good a conductor of electricity as copper. It's metal, still conducts electricity, still sparks, but it is way tougher. It's way stronger, okay? So that platinum plug, when that electricity comes across here and sparks across, it is not taking those little pots out of it. So after 100,000 miles, we might have wore off most of those platinum pads, but we're still at like a 050 gap. Okay. That's still a pretty decent range. It'll still spark. It'll still run pretty good. Okay. But it's harder to jump that arc. If you have a stock motor, stock coil, stock fuel, stock everything, it's probably adequate. You're not going to gain horsepower or make more horsepower by going to a copper plug. Okay. Probably a lot cheaper. Right? But if you're not actually having a problem making that spark happen when it's supposed to, then you're not really going to gain anything. Okay. Now, our good buddies, the E3 spark plugs and the double platinum and the quad platinums, the Bosch double and 2 or Bosch 4, whatever. Okay. Here's the thing to remember about those spark plugs. And I will stand on this hill. I won't say I'll die on it, because if you can provide me evidence that I've yet to see, and I've looked, I can change my mind. However, I've yet to see it. So you got a real uphill battle, okay? The issue with having, if our electrode is here, if we have multiple grounds, right? Electricity always follows the path of least resistance. Always. Okay? It does not matter what you are trying to put electricity through. It will follow the path of least resistance. That's why if you're handling things like power wires, like, overhead power wires, you need to have protective clothing on. You need to have rubber gloves and all that kind of stuff, because you want to have more resistance from that wire to the ground, than wherever it is arcing out otherwise. Okay. Otherwise, if you provide less resistance, it will go through you. Okay. Spark plugs are no different. If you have a single electrode and you have the electricity coming into that electrode, right, it is going to fire one spark. And it might come over here. Okay. And then the little bit of carbon buildup or whatever's going on here is going to get, the resistance is going to get slightly higher, and it'll jump to here until this one gets a little higher, and then it'll jump to here, and then this will get a little higher, and it'll jump to here. But you get one spark at a time. If you have multiple electrodes, you don't get 4 all at the same time. Okay. They always want to show you those fancy videos where it looks like just this lightning storm happening, where it's jumping all around all the spark plugs. Problem is that that's really, really fast. And if you slowed that video down, and I mean slowed it way down, right? Oh, I'm getting old. You're going to see that it's jumping to one, and then it's jumping to the other, and it's jumping over here. It's single sparks, okay? And if it's one arc, say if this is your electrode and you've got a ground here and a ground here and a ground here, if it's a single continuous arc, right, and it's going here, and then that arc just slowly walks its way until it's over here, and then slowly walks its way until it's over here, it's because these have less resistance than this did. Right? So it's moving to find that. Now that's the part that some people have made the argument to me. Well, see, that's the thing, Todd. If you have less resistance over here, that means you got more spark over here than you do over here. It seems like a fairly logical argument. I can give you that. I can admit that there's most likely a little bit more electricity here than here if it's moved over here to the path of least resistance. But the thing is that when it jumps from one point to the other and that point to that point, that takes more electricity to do. And it's carboning up that one part. Okay. Having multiple electrodes only means that that spark will move from each one. Okay. It does not provide more spark. It does not provide, more power. Okay. Your coil pack determines how much power gets to the spark plug. The resistance of your spark plug, the materials of the spark plug can determine how much electricity passes through it and out across a strap. But multiple straps, they're not going to add up to a much better, hotter spark. I have, Ryan puts here, he runs E3s. I got 3 miles a gallon going to E3, which I will say, if you got 3 miles a gallon better, that means that you did not have proper spark beforehand. I would say that one. Okay. And then they only work well in through heads. What do you mean by through heads, though, Ryan? I am just a little confused on what you mean by that. Like it sticks down into the combustion chamber a little farther. So, Ryan likes them. Says he got better gas mileage. I have talked to 2 to 3 times more people who have had much bigger issues that were resolved by simply removing the E3 spark plugs. Okay. Part of the issue with the E3 spark plugs, okay, is they can actually make it harder to ignite your fuel and air mixture. If you have your electrode, if this is your spark plug, okay, then here's your electrode. You're going to have a strap. It comes up, if you're looking at it from the top, and it's going to cover that much, okay? If you're looking at it from the side, I'm not good at drawing, okay? Let's keep that in mind, right? So if you look at it from the side, right? This is what you're going to see. So this is all area that is available, right? For your fuel air mixture. Okay. If I take an E3, right, and I tell you what I'll do real quick. Okay. I got what you're saying, Ryan. Ryan says a Hemi style. So I want to show you guys an actual picture of a E3 spark plug. Just that way you guys can see what it is we're talking about. Okay. We'll actually just go images. I'll find a good one. Okay. Oh, here we go. This is a good picture. Okay. Well, let me see if I can find a bigger one. Yeah, this one's a little bigger picture. Oh, yeah, there we go. Okay, I'm gonna share it to you. All right. This is an E3 spark plug. Okay. So as Ryan says, they're supposed to direct the spark through the diamond-shaped hole. So if we look at this spark plug from the top, okay, and I'm going to do my best to look at this. Okay, so essentially we have a strap here, a strap here, a strap here, okay? And then we're going to do this, and this, and then I'm not good at drawing, okay? Okay, looks something like this, with the electrode is basically right here, right? Okay. If we look at it from the side, now we're going to look at it from this angle, okay? So we've got our electrode in the middle, and then we have strap there, and then running down the back, we also have a strap. Now, I know you're going to say, Todd, there's a hole in the middle. You're right, but if we're looking at it from this side, we're going to see this back portion of it, okay? You'll notice there is a whole hell of a lot more between that electrode and the air and fuel mix, okay? Because their whole, and as Ryan says, it directs the spark through the diamond-shaped hole, which, by the way, I'm going to do this just so that you guys can see my fancy picture, okay? It's supposed to direct the spark through that hole. Well, this goes back to electricity and the path of least resistance. The spark energy, if we're looking at this from the side, we're going to, so say we're looking at it cut in half, okay? So we have the electrode, right? If we cut that in half and we look at that there, right? There is, like, this is our diamond hole, okay? It does not come up here. That spark goes right here. It doesn't come up through that hole unless there's less resistance to do so at the top than there is the bottom. Now, part of their whole, the diamond fire is that spark goes like this. That's their thing. If you look at the pictures, it just shows this buzz through there, right? If you can get fuel and air in here where it could ignite it and shoot a flame out through the middle, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. But when you shroud the electrode, okay, you don't get that fuel and air to the actual spot of ignition nearly as well. And that is why I have known significantly more people who have had issues with E3 spark plugs than people who have had better. Because it physically hides the spark from the majority of this fuel air mixture in almost every occasion. Okay. The reason why, Ryan, it works better in a hemispherical head and a through head is because if my combustion chamber is shaped like this and my spark plug's over here, as the piston comes up, it's not going to swirl through and past the electrode. But if my combustion chamber's here and that spark plug sticks down farther, as that fuel and air comes through there and it mixes, it stands a better chance of actually getting between there. The shape of your combustion chamber, like, if you guys have ever heard of somebody indexing spark plugs, okay, show of hands, who has indexed spark plugs before, or witnessed indexed spark plugs, or knows what I'm talking about when I say you index spark plugs. I luckily didn't actually have to help do it, but I was hanging out with my uncle one summer, who drag races, and his buddies all drag race, and they do it really well. Like, they have fast cars. This was years ago, but one of his buddies that he used drag races for a very, very long time held the Pontiac record, Pontiac motor record. Big Chief would conveniently ignore that guy existed and would try to downplay his record because it wasn't in a steel car. Okay, that guy lived just up the road from my uncle. Good buddies with him. Okay, one of his old timers that we were hanging out with used to build the Pro Stock trucks. Like, Pro Stock NHRA had a truck for a while. He built some of those. And he was telling me that at one point they were ordering cases and cases of spark plugs because they were running through their magnetos were so hot, they were just burning up spark plugs like crazy, right? And they were running through so many that they would buy thousands at a time to put them in their indexer so that they could get the exact ones that they want. Okay. Well, what indexing a spark plug is that, you know, we're gonna, so this is just a reference line. Okay. So when you thread a spark plug in, you know, if this is our spark plug, you know, electrodes in the middle, that where the strap is on a single strap spark plug, right? So say I want the strap to be here. Okay. So this is my index line. This is where I want it to be. Another spark plug, just in the way that they're manufactured, where the strap is attached compared to the threads, that strap might be over here or down here or over here or here, or, you know, it could be anywhere in that circle, just not where I want it to be. Okay. So what I would do is take every single spark plug and either screw them into the cylinder head that I'm running, or make a jig that had the exact threads in the exact way that I needed them, because where you start the thread can change where they go, right? Because that strap of that spark plug, okay, in a cylinder head, like the old school, it would be much better if I just showed you a picture of this. So in the old school, like small block Chevy stuff, okay, see if I can find what I'm looking for really, really fast. Probably not. Images. Anything zoomed in here, guys? Oh, yeah, here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Well, this will be a better one. Okay. Now we're going to share this tab instead. I'm going to come back over here. We're going to add it to the stage. Okay. What's up, Bobby? What's up, Travis? All right. So in the bottom of this picture, okay, that little square hump is where the spark plug goes. And then there's the two valves beside that you can see, obviously, inside of there. So this combustion chamber, okay? Where you put the strap of the electrode could change the airflow through the valves in that cylinder head. Noticeably, okay? So when you index spark plugs, what you're doing is you are figuring out exactly where the electrode is going to land in the combustion chamber, and then you are trying to get the spark plug in the cylinder that you need it to put the strap where you want it to be. Okay? That's what indexing spark plugs is. Indexing spark plugs is a very real thing that can change the horsepower characteristics of an engine. Now, we are not talking about, Pappy's old 350 in a square body that's all original, okay? We are talking some purpose-built stuff that's we're maxing out, right? But that strap of that spark plug is enough to really mess with the airflow if it's not in the right position. A single strap, okay? Depending on how the air is coming in and swirling and tumbling and the air fuel's mixing, that strap can reduce airflow. Or if it's in the way, the air fuel, like the fuel vaporization, can be deflected away from the electrode and away from the spark. So by indexing the plug, and if the air is coming in from this direction, okay, and it's just kind of deflecting up around, or if you're looking at it from the top, there's our strap. If it comes in and it's going around the sides or it's going over the top, and it's not actually getting here to get ignited, well, if we turn that so that the air is coming in this direction, it is going to blow into this gap first and then try to go around, okay? So we are forcing air fuel into this space versus allowing it to deflect around. Because when that spark happens, it has to find fuel to ignite. Has to, okay? If you have very little fuel in that area, or you have no fuel in that area, that spark is going to hit and nothing's going to happen, okay? So the large, there you go, okay? Sorry about that, as my dad said. Let's go over it again real quick. Air's coming in this way, deflects around the strap. Air comes in, it deflects around the sides of the strap, or it comes in and gets in that space in the middle, okay? So if you have a giant hog of an electrode, strap at the top, it can hinder ignition because you're not going to be allowed to or you're not going to get that air fuel in that gap to ignite like you need it to. Okay. And, it's hard to believe. I cannot physically wrap my head around how fast things have to happen at speed. Okay. Let me grab my calculator. Okay. Like I said, I twist my motors, that last motor, the rev limiter was set to 96. Okay. So let's say 7,000 RPMs. Okay. So revolutions per minute. We are going to divide that by 60. Because that'll give us the revolutions per second. 60 seconds per minute, right? That is 116.6 repeating revolutions per second. Okay? So these revolutions are happening in milliseconds. A lot of milliseconds, but milliseconds, man. Like it is 117 revolutions per second. So for air to be flowing through the intake, pick up the fuel from the fuel injector, flow through the head, past the valve, get to the combustion chamber, swirl around, and to find that spark has to happen so quickly that shrouding that can cause serious problems. Okay. So that's why there are, and this is anecdotal, I do understand that. I have found so many more people that have had problems running E3 and trying to turn higher RPM than I have people who have had success. Okay. Stock motor, stock RPM, low RPM, probably never notice a difference, right? I'm not gonna lie, you probably wouldn't. But a high compression, high flow head with, you know, a high RPM, there is a chance you can run a misfire. So the best spark plug, you know, E3 spark plugs are $10, $12, $13 a piece, right? Autolite copper, you know, they're $2 a piece, right? So you're going to save a lot of money by running just a copper plug. You could potentially save yourself some problems. And I'm talking about, like, the other thing too is, like, I don't want to make it seem like I'm just beating up on E3. Okay. So I'm I'm gonna show you guys another picture here real quick. Okay. Come on. Very tiny, you can't see it, so we're just gonna share this one. Okay. This is a Bosch or an NGK. Okay. There's 4 straps. You can see how shrouded that is. Okay. Now, some heads are set up for this. You know, that's what they recommend, like from the factory and stuff. If you run these, if you are running E3s and you really love them, keep running them. Okay. If you're having issues with them, try some coppers, right? A properly functioning ignition system that fires at the proper time will make the most possible horsepower. If you have swapped coils, swapped plugs, swapped wires, and made a whole lot more power, chances are you had a problem somewhere in that line beforehand. Okay. You were not getting adequate spark energy across the air gap of the plug or getting that spark at the proper time. Okay. Ignition systems will not make horsepower, but you can gain horsepower back you should have had to begin with. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay. As Ryan says, definitely don't work well in old Chevy style heads. Yeah. And that, Ryan, you know, it really should. That kind of illustrates, like, the head design is going to change the way the air tumbles and flows in air. And it's just, you know, in an old style Chevy head, it's just, in my opinion, it's blocking where, you know, it's blocking that spark from reaching that, the air fuel. Okay. Like, the reason that, like, MSD ignitions, multiple spark discharge, that's what MSD stands for, is multiple spark discharge. Okay. The reason that they make power, you know, made horsepower, this big gain, is that, you know, the old school distributors, man, when that distributor would swing around, you know, you had your button in the middle, came out, had a little T-bar, and then there was contact posts. And it would swing around, and your coil would send electricity from here out to here. It would jump, and then this was attached to a spark plug, or attached to a post, and it'd send it out to your spark plug. Okay. Then that would swing around to the next one, and once it got close enough to this one and far enough away from that one, the spark would jump from here to here. And your computer, or, you know, your points and distributor and all that, they are trying to fire the coil at just the right time so that it's centered and it fires it here. And then it gets to here and it fires it here. It gets to here and it fires it there. Okay. MSD, what they did is they figured out somehow, I don't understand, that, and I'm gonna draw this a little better. Okay. Make it easier to hopefully see. Okay. What they figured out is that when it came out here and you've got the tip to your rotor and you've got your post here, they don't have one big spark. Okay. As you would get this leading edge close to this edge, right? So you're going to walk this back. They would have a spark, a spark, a spark, a spark, a spark, a spark, and then they'd wait. And then when it got here, you know, the front edge, it would spark. And then as it came through, another, here, another, here, another, here, another. So it wasn't firing a spark plug one time. It would fire it 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times. Okay. And it happens so fast. Electricity can travel so fast that it would discharge round numbers. Okay. I'm just guessing. It would fire, say, 5 times in the same 1 degree of travel as, you know, you'd get 1 spark before. So it wasn't necessarily that it was a hotter spark. It was that it would fire it multiple times. Okay. So you're getting the same energy for 1 spark. You're just getting 5 of them. So maybe the air's swirling and that pocket's over here and it fires and nothing would happen. That pocket of air and fuel's over here on the 4th spark. That's when it ignites. So it's just so fast that it can actually get that to ignite. And that is what a lot of newer cars are doing. Is they can get that little bit through the coil with your distributorless and stuff like that. They can fire it a few times like that. So it's not necessarily just 1 time. Okay. So that's the thing to keep in mind with like the MSD, is that it isn't, they can make power because they're making sure that gets ignited. So Ryan's asking, he says, have you seen the Pulsar plugs with the capacitor in the plug? I've seen versions of it and variations of it. To be honest with you, they are a crutch. Okay. Coil packs, kind of neat thing about coil packs is they take 12 volts and they turn it into 40,000 volts. Okay. They do it by having like this coil here. Okay. By the way, wasted spark. So this is 1 coil. This is another coil. I'm sorry it's not a little bit brighter. Maybe this will help. Okay. 1 coil, 2 coils. Okay. Electricity has to be grounded. Positive, negative. The way these work, the coils are isolated. Your spark goes out one side, goes through the motor, jumps across 1 spark plug, goes through the motor over to the other spark plug, jumps across it the other way, and comes back to the other side of this coil. Okay. But these coils all operate on, they build up a magnetic field and then they collapse it. And that induces voltage to a secondary coil and hence produces a high voltage. The bigger the buildup and the bigger, faster the crash, the higher the voltage that comes out is. A capacitor, all a capacitor does is it takes small inputs and it collects it until it reaches a certain point, and then boom, it sends it all out at once. Okay. So in the having a capacitor like in the plug or in the wire, okay, what it's doing is it's taking the output of your coil and it is not sending it through until it reaches a certain voltage, right? Or it'll collect it and then send it out. If you have a high enough voltage coil, or you have wires that don't drop the voltage, it's unnecessary. And it can delay that ignition event. Because instead of it hitting one end of the plug, traveling through and exiting the other as quickly as possible, that capacitor saying, hey, hold up, I need a little bit more. All right, let's go. And again, we're talking milliseconds, fractions of a fraction of a second. 7,000 RPM, 117 revolutions a second. Okay. But when you have your dwell time is 0.05 of a millisecond, right? That's how long your coil is charging. If you delay the spark, by 2 milliseconds, you could be a couple degrees off from where you should be, right? So if you have a weak ignition system where it can build that and it can provide a hotter spark to the tip of the plug, it might show some gains. It might show an improvement. But if you have a hot enough coil and you have wires that allow that electricity to go to the plug, it should be unnecessary. So I would really, 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 really have to see some evidence for almost any super fancy new technology when it comes to ignitions. Okay. Coil packs have changed shapes, they have changed sizes, they have changed, from one with a distributor that we collapse the field with points to distributorless, to coil on plug, stuff like that. But the way that coil operates is still effectively the same. Primary and secondary wiring builds up, collapses, introduces current through magnetic induction, and sends that energy out. Okay. Spark plug wires have been around for hundreds of years. The material might have changed slightly. It might have slightly better conductivity, might have better radio interference, but they're essentially the same. Okay. I am here to tell you guys and gals, the government, does not matter the administration, so don't start that, makes laws as far as fuel economy and power and all this, as far as automakers are concerned. Okay. If a spark plug or a wire could produce some magically better spark or better mileage or more horsepower, okay, up to 5% better fuel economy, okay, every single auto manufacturer in the world would use that technology. If Chrysler could screw in a single part and get 5% better fuel economy across their entire gasoline fleet, they would implement that change. They would stop production lines to implement that change. Okay. The cost savings from like having to report to the EPA, because you got to figure too, if you have a car that gets 10 miles a gallon, a 20% increase is only like 2%. But if you get 40 miles a gallon, a 20% increase is like, it'll take you close to 50, right? You can have the fuel economy can increase so well, okay? Like, it's insane how much better it can be if this was that magic bullet. Like, it would be so much better for all these OEs, okay? They don't do that. And they have millions of dollars R&D budget. Like, I would guarantee you, if you walked into, the Chrysler R&D Center or the Ford R&D Center or the Chevy R&D Center, I guarantee you there are E3 spark plugs somewhere in that building. They've tested them. I guarantee it. I toured Chrysler's technology center back when I went into college. The things they had there testing were for those express reasons. They had like 40 dynos that ran constantly, testing all of those things, because they're searching for tenths of a mile an hour, tenths of miles per gallon, tenths of horsepower to be able to meet these ever increasing demands. Okay. So that's something to keep in mind, right? Sean says, if I went from coil pack to coilover plug, would it give me more performance? No. Most likely, no. The amount of time it takes electricity to go from, one end of this to the other is minuscule. Okay. There are some of the fastest cars in the world, some of the highest horsepower turbocharged stuff have longer spark plug wires because they got to get that. NHRA, they run a magneto, which is part of the reason why they got big long spark plug wires. Okay. Coil on plug for me allowed me to separate, and the dwell time on these is twice as high because it fires every other, like it fires twice as often. Okay. Because I'm firing for number 1 and number 4. Right. And I'm firing for 2 and 3 because it travels from one to the other. Okay. If I separate those out, right, I'm now firing 1, then 4, 2, then 3. Okay. So for me to reach 9,000 RPM, I wanted that increased dwell ability. Okay. But if you take one of these coils and you were just to wire coil on plug, you're still firing those coils twice as much because you didn't separate them sequentially. You're batch firing them effectively. Okay. So if you don't have a full standalone system, you can't go from a batch fire to a coil on plug system without some sort of module, right? And I'm full standalone. That's why I did it. This is literally going on my dad's car, Sean. This coil pack will be put on my dad's car this weekend along with these wires. So, because I'm gonna take some pictures, so I can send them to Grand Telly. Okay. And my dad is asking, kind of off topic, but still spark plug related. Why do some engines, like my truck, he has the 6.2 in Ford, have 2 spark plugs with one on the side and one on top of the same cylinder? My V8 truck has 16 spark plugs. Few reasons. Ryan says it fires on both strokes to eliminate pre-detonation. Maybe. Oftentimes, what is happening is they're either attempting to get zones ignited, 2 different zones inside the combustion chamber ignited, or they are also just attempting to make sure that the spark actually happens when it's supposed to, where it's supposed to. Okay. I've heard both ways. Okay. The biggest one that a lot of times happen. My Ranger, by the way, Dad, my 2.3 and my Ranger is a dual plug. It actually has one on each side of the head in a 4-cylinder, right? But some of the combustion chambers, if your combustion chamber is like this and your piston is shaped like this, okay, I can have 2 pockets. So if I ignite this one, if I have a spark plug down here, that flame front might die out. It might not actually carry over. But if I ignite both of these at the same time, that flame front comes and it meets here, and you can increase power that way. Okay. The other thing that I've heard is that it can increase power at the plug, not horsepower, because again, if I have a coil with 2 out, and I've got cylinder 1, cylinder 2, cylinder 3, cylinder 4, I'm coming down here to this one, and I'm coming down here to this one, right? Well, if I take one coil like this, and I put 2 spark plugs right here, I'm going to fire both of those almost effectively simultaneously. So I will have 2 sparks at effectively the same time for double the power, which are real close together, right? Because on a distributor list, on a wasted spark, like a Neon's what they call a wasted spark, okay? That spark is actually happening in the exhaust stroke, okay? So this is coming up on compression, it's igniting. This one's coming up on the exhaust stroke, so there should technically be no fuel in there. So that's just a dead spark. It's wasted. Nothing's happening, okay? Whereas if I send that wasted spark through the same combustion chamber, I can get it to jump in 2 different spots, hit 2 different zones, effectively double the power, and come up here. So, if the spark plugs are kind of 2, side by side, it's probably in that range. Now, if you can actually, if you have an actual source, you can point towards to me. That's like, hey, here's this article I read by such and such, and this is why they do the dual plug or something. I will look into it deeper. If it is something other than what I have just basically told you guys, I'll do a quick little snippet, maybe even film like a little how-to video. I'll put my doctor coat on and be like, hey, here's why you might have 2 plugs, right? Because like I said, my Ranger, my 2002 Ford Ranger, had the 2.5 with the dual plug head. So it actually had, this is the engine, here's the cylinders. It actually had one over here and one over here for each cylinder. So whereas like all the older 2.3s and 2.5s and stuff, they didn't have that. So first time I ever seen it, I was a kid. I told my grandfather, I was like, that thing's got a V8 in it. He's like, what? And I was like, look, it's got 8 spark plug wires. And my grandfather laughed at me and then didn't explain anything. He just thought I was stupid at the time. So, yeah. Any other questions as far as ignition that I would be able to answer? I'll tell you what, while I'm waiting just a second to see if you guys have any questions, first off, hit the like button for me. I'd appreciate it. It's the only thing I ask of you to do. I will Google this real quick too. Wikipedia isn't necessarily the best. All right, so I'll have to look a little bit farther because basically everything that I'm seeing here is just people's like guesses or saying, and I would like to actually find a like straight up technical answer. So yeah, so I'm looking at it a little bit farther. So yeah. How often do you change your copper plugs? I'll be honest with you, Chris. I normally can get a full season out of them without any issue. But I would just recommend, you know, after however many races you feel comfortable with, pull them out and check them. It is the easy, you know, it depends on your engine, but like a Neon, they're super easy to do. I just pop plug wire off and pull them out and see, you know, what's the gap? Has the gap increased? Has it ate any of the electrode or ate any of the strap away? Things like that. So that's basically the advice I can give you, because the hotter the spark, the faster that it will eat it away. But if you have, you know, hotter or colder, you know, depending on the mixture, depending on combustion chamber shit, like there's a lot of variables that can happen. So yeah. Gemini, did you cover an MSD box? I covered what an MSD box is as far as a multiple spark discharge. So yeah, we kind of covered it. E85 versus 110 or pump gas make a difference on plug life or style to you? What's up, Kenny? So it definitely can. E85 versus 110 or like 93. 110 is typically leaded, and the lead can cover a lot of stuff. So 110 is actually a little hard, and it's harder to ignite. It is harder to spark and actually ignite. So you want to make sure you have the best plug-in that provides the best spark energy. Okay, so whatever that means to you, with 110, because it is harder to ignite. E85 can be harder to ignite because there's physically so much more fuel in the mixture that it can be harder because it'll want to like travel through that instead of like across it kind of deal. My brain's fried for a second. I can't think of the actual word I want to use there, but like instead of hitting, it might not be as vaporized. E85 might not be, just because there's physically more in the charge, but it is cooler. So it can actually cool the spark plug, cool the strap, stuff like that a little bit better. So it can be a little harder. I will tell you guys and gals, if you're going to ask me, hey, what spark plug should I run? I'm going to tell you right now, pick the manufacturer that you want to run their spark plug and call them or email them or reach out to them. Okay. It's pretty much that simple. Okay. Because they are going to be able to say, you know, this is the kind of gap you want. This is the plug. This is the heat range. You know, they have the answers. NGK, we've called NGK a few times. They're always great at answering technical questions. I can give you a 1,000-foot view. They are going to be able to say your motor with those mods should be running this plug. Okay. So something to keep in mind. Biggest misunderstanding about fuel is octane rating. The higher the octane, the slower the burn. The burn rate should be the same. It is the resistance to detonation. It is how hard or how easy is it to ignite by itself. So it's harder to physically catch on fire, but the burn rate should basically be the same. So close. But Dan says, I picked up power on the engine dyno by opening up the gap 10 thousandths over what worked best on race gas on E85. Yeah, I would fully believe it, Dan. I have not done any of that testing. I actually, Dad's on E85. I'm going to be on E85. The E85 vehicles I've driven are either my van, which is flex fuel, or my Subaru. And that one, it got a bunch of new plugs because I was chasing something anyway. So turned out it wasn't anything spark related. But yeah, Kenny, same-ish concept. If you guys ever say a comment like that and I'm like, nope, it's slightly this, I do hope that it doesn't come across as me like, God, you're an idiot. I'm so much smarter than you. I just take it as my responsibility to make sure that the wording is proper to try to stop, myths and urban legends and old wives' tales kind of thing from continuing. Like, you need back pressure. No, back pressure is always bad. So if I ever correct you guys, gals, if you're watching, please don't take it personally. And I know, Kenny, I know that you wouldn't, but I just wanted to say that as a general statement. So, by the way, I am going to go live in the subscriber group. I got something I want to show you guys. So, mainly some of the new products that did not make it up on the website in time to do it tonight. So, the goal is to try to get them up tonight so we can do it tomorrow. If it doesn't happen tonight, it will happen tomorrow so we can do it this weekend. Because I got some cool new stuff to sell you guys. So, I'm going to show you a few of it. But yeah, the 85 stuff, Dan, I absolutely believe you because it makes sense that it would be harder with it being cooler and more saturated and ethanol, being alcohol instead of gasoline. It doesn't have the same energy. That's why it requires more E85. So yeah, I 1,000% believe you. So Kenny, I will try to tag you when I go live in there. Okay. So, well, that's what I got for tonight, guys and gals. If you have not hit the like button, please do that already. Huge thanks to Granatelli for hooking us up with some parts. You'll see, I'm going to probably film a little video of it with it and stuff like that. So when you see it, please interact with it with these company videos that I post. It lets them know that you guys are there, you're active, you're listening, you're watching, and they're going to want to sell you more product. They might want to make product for you. Granatelli, if they get a big flood of like, hey, do you guys sell K-Series coils? Do you have K-Series Honda coils? Do you have K-Series coils? It might be a lot more apt to make them if they know the demand is there. So yeah, thank you all for tonight. Subscribers, we'll be live in like 2 minutes. I'm going to step outside a second and then we're going to go live. So I will see you guys in a few minutes. I will see the rest of y'all very, very soon.